I've got the great pleasure to introduce Scott Shaw, who's sitting over there. He's a very tall man, sitting down. He is the CTO of Thoughtworks in Asia Pacific, and he's responsible for all the work we do in the entire region. So that spans Australia, New Zealand. It also spans Thailand, Vietnam. It is what you do. So he also has been instrumental in fostering community. He is the custodian of this conference as well. He's been the main sponsor for it over the years. So I'm very glad that we have him here. So he's done a lot of technology strategy across government clients, public, private sector. He's got a long career just doing technology, architecture, and also leading teams within Thoughtworks. So I'll be quite keen to hear what he has got to say. The title today is going to be focused on internal developer platforms, and I know Scott has done a lot of research with not just Thoughtworkers, that's what we call our employees, but also our clients globally to get a bit of an idea of what makes their internal platform successful and what doesn't. So we're very much looking forward to that. So thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Heiko. All right. Let's get into it. So I've been talking about building platforms for a while now. And if you've been around Melbourne, you might have heard me talk about platforms before. I think I gave my first talk about platforms back in 2016. So why am I talking about it? Why is this still a thing? Well, for one thing, this Gartner put platform engineering on its top 10 technology trends for 2023. I got to say, I was kind of surprised to see that because we've been talking about it for so long. There's Gartner's definition of what platform engineering is, which is suspiciously similar to the definition you will see most commonly, which is Evan Botcher, our colleague from years past, who has a definition that's been repeated in the Team Topologies book over and over. But and also, I don't know if you follow Dave Farley. He's kind of a acerbic commentator on things technology, and he has a video that's very critical of this trend. And in his view, platform engineering is just distributed systems. We've been doing distributed systems for a long time. They're hard to do, and we need to pay special attention when we do it. But I think what has happened is we've gained since 2016 an awful lot of experience, and I'd like to share some of that experience today. First of all, I just want to be clear on what we're talking about. So we used to kind of lump all these into one thing called digital platforms. Lately, platform's obviously overused and confusing term, but lately we found that this is really helpful, this taxonomy, and we're more and more sort of adopting this language. So that we kind of break the platforms into four kinds. And at the top, we have the customer experience platform. And I think the talk following mine will be really talking about one of those. So design systems, shared components, micro ends, those kinds of things. Then there's the business capabilities platform, which would be a set of APIs through which you can digitally access core business capabilities and reuse them. And then at the bottom, the engineering platform. And of course, the data platform kind of spans all of these. Just to give you a little more insight as to what I'm talking about with the engineering platform, one of my colleagues in North America has found it helpful to break it into these planes. So we have, the developer control plane. We have compliance and governance is an important thing to implement through the platform, delivery, observability. So things like observability that's the same for everybody. So you can build an application, and if you use the platform, you automatically get all the alerts, logging, and other things that you need to be compliant with your organization. Pipelines, build pipelines as a service, those kinds of things. So, and it's all tied together with this idea of platform product management, which I'll have a lot to say about in a minute. And we very much subscribe to the book Team Topologies idea of a platform team. So I'm going to talk about platforms, but I'll also talk about platform teams. I think that's the really important thing, is the behavior of the platform team. Now, one of the things that I have been doing for a long time is I'm one of the authors of the Thoughtworks Technology Radar, and we get together every 6 months and decide what things we're going to put on that radar. And there's this item, applying product management to internal platforms, that we have resurrected time and time again. We first put this on the radar in November of 2017. And then we thought and this is because people are bringing it, everything on the radar comes out of experience of what people are doing around the world in Thoughtworks. And people bring these things to us and they say, I think we need to call attention to this. So again, in May 2018, we felt like we needed to call attention to it because we just didn't see it applied. And then again, in May 2020, we brought it back again and moved it into Adopt because we felt like this is a message that people needed to hear. And then in April 2023, so that was the most recent version of the radar that was published. There's a new one coming out in a few weeks. But we felt like, once again, because people are observing two things. One, when you do it, things go really well. When you don't do it, people run into trouble. So the fact that I'm getting the sense that we're not explaining this very well. The fact that we have to keep bringing it up. So I wanted to give you some concrete things. I wanted to talk about some of the success factors. So there are lots of ways things can go wrong, but in talking to people all over the world, and one of my former jobs was as the global head of technology for our platforms practice. I got to talk. And that's one of the great things about my job is I get to stick my nose in everybody else's business and ask them questions about what's going on with technology in their world. So I found there's certain threads that are repeated over and over when I talk to people who have actually been involved with this work. And too many clients, hundreds of these things, too many clients to actually list all of them. We've been doing this kind of stuff. So I want to talk about some of the critical success factors. I'll call them. There's 7 things I want to talk about in this talk, and hopefully we'll get through them in the time that we have. These almost none of this has to do with technology, really. I was kind of disappointed when I was talking to people because I was like, I wanted to hear about how they're using Kubernetes and building their containers and what kind of tools they were using to build pipelines and which ones working with. That's not what anybody really wanted to talk about. There are a few exceptions to that, but mostly we're talking about people and process and organizational structure and ways of working. So it starts from the beginning. And getting it right from the start is really important. So how you start talking about before you start building anything, how do you decide what you're going to build? That's really important. And then when you start building, you need, how do you engage with the rest of the organization? This is something that you're building for your colleagues to use. So how are you engaging with your colleagues to make sure that what you're building is the right thing for them? And finally, over the long term, because one of the symptoms that we see, one of the failure modes we observe a lot is platforms like sugar hit platforms that start out great and with a lot of enthusiasm provide a lot of benefits, but over time that wears down and that actually becomes more of a source of friction than a benefit. So how do you operate and evolve the platform over time? So I'm going to broken into these phases. So let's get into it. Let's start with creating the right foundations. The success factor 1 is about engaging with your users and understanding that you're building a product for developers, for delivery teams, for the whole delivery team to use. And you really need to understand where they're coming from to be able to do that. The platform needs to solve, and if it's going to be successful and you're going to get users and you're going to continue to get funding for that platform, it has to solve real problems that people are experiencing on the ground. Every organization is different. I can't tell you where the greatest waste, and there's a lot of overlap between this, by the way, and the previous talk about engineering effectiveness, because this is what the platforms are intended to do, is improve the effectiveness of engineering groups. I don't know where your waste is until I go in and actually talk to people. And so there's how you talk to people. There are a lot of tools, but there's 3 that are particularly important that we've found. The first is just doing contextual inquiry. This is design thinking. This is what user experience people do a lot, the research. So either in workshops or one-on-one, sitting down talking to people. The other things that I'm going to be talking about in a second are surveys and good old value stream mapping. So it's really important to engage with these folks early in the process. And it gives you, there's really two things you're doing when you do this. But through these, we have like functional workshops. So you might have a workshop with all developers and a workshop with all BAs and a workshop with all QAs. That kind of thing has worked for us in the past. There's two things you're doing. One is you are building empathy with those folks. So that's fundamental to design thinking, right? And creating a great product is developing empathy with your users, understanding where their pain points are and where the biggest problems are. But you're also building support. You're also getting their buy-in. You're getting them to look forward to what you're going to build, and it's an opportunity to share with them. And this theme comes up again and again. Another thing is developer surveys. So this is a really cheap, easy thing that you can do, and relatively cheap. So we've been using these spreadsheets, Google Forms, those kinds of things for a while. It's a really important tool to get data on what the actual developer experience is like on the ground. And it's relatively painless and easy to do. One thing to be really careful of when you're doing developer surveys, though, is the wording of the questions, because the questions, as anybody who's designed a survey knows, can be interpreted differently by different developers, and so, or any team member for that matter. It's really important to get the wording right, and it's just particularly true when you have people for whom English is not their first language. It's really easy to put in colloquialisms, idioms that they may not understand, and it can interpret the wrong way. So if you want accuracy, you have to make sure that the questions are right. There's also commercial tools that I'll talk about in a sec, like DX is one that we've had good experience with. That kind of implements real-time developer surveys and gives you an up-to-date view of what's going on. And then the third thing that's really, really important is this value stream mapping stage. So this is a template kind of that we use for value stream mapping. It's important, we've always done path to production mapping. Starts much earlier and ends later. So this starts with the onboarding experience of the developers when they first come onto the team or when they first join the organization. What is their experience like? Are they able to find the right information? Goes through the requirements elaboration process, might even include the funding and approval process, and then the build and the deployment and the maintenance, and finally the offboarding, which is something that people often don't pay enough attention to. It's particularly important from a security perspective. So the idea is what you want to do here is quantify sources of waste. And we talked about that in the last talk, but it's really, this gives you an idea of where you can make the greatest improvement and where in your particular organization, or the organization here, that you're going to make the biggest impact. And it also tells you what metrics you're going to need to collect later on. So once I'm going to talk about sharing your progress with the rest of the organization, those metrics that you want to share are going to be the ones that you uncover here. So at each stage of the way, we have suggestions for things that you can measure in each one of these steps. So success factor number 2 is about value. So we've been talking about, as I said, platform as a product for a long time, and it occurred to me that maybe we're overlooking one of the most fundamental things about a product. Products have to be profitable. That it's not a product if it's not a financial success. And likewise, your platform has to be a financial success. So the value of the platform has to be at the forefront of all of your conversations from the very start, and you have to almost beat people over the head with the value that the platform is delivering in order for them to understand that. It's a really, and in order to get that value, you need to measure both how much it's costing to build and how much benefit you're getting from it, in some way. This is easy when you've got a product that you're selling, you've got a widget that you're building and selling to the public. It's fairly easy to get cost of goods sold and to understand, how much profit you're making on that widget, but it's much more difficult with an internal. I'm not saying that this is easy, but there are two fundamental ways that you can articulate value of the platform. The first is a top-down kind of approach, and that is business objectives. So this is something that, is going to present an inspiring vision of the objectives, and by business objectives, I mean getting to market faster, being able to experiment more easily, lowering the risk. Risk is a big one. So perhaps you're lowering the risk of failures or outages by implementing the platform. So this is really great for product owners, for CTOs, for business execs. This can be a very compelling sort of way to talk about value. But it's very coarse quantification. It's hard to put an exact number on any of these things, especially a dollar figure. So, and it's very subjective as well. But it does create an inspiring vision. The other approach would be value modeling. I wrote cost modeling on this slide, but you should think of it as value modeling. It's not just cost, obviously it's benefits as well. So this is a very bottom-up, fine-grained way to express the value of the platform, where you actually look at, okay, how many teams do I have building the platform? How many people on each team? How much does each of those people cost an hour? How much is the cloud time costing me? How much are the cloud resources costing? And whatever other expenses that you might have. And then how much savings am I get? How much time am I saving by building this platform? This all goes into a spreadsheet, which is always very compelling for CFOs. They speak spreadsheet as a language, and that's a really good way to articulate to certain audiences, the people who are managing the dollars. This is a very compelling, and allows you to predict when your investment in the platform is going to cross over into the black and become something positive and actually bring returns in terms of the efficiency and the elimination of waste and the improvement in the throughput, or get the same throughput with less effort. But it's not a particularly inspiring vision. But it is very compelling to certain parties. Success factor 3. And then there is another audience we want to engage with, and that's the stakeholders. That's the senior leadership. And we find that Inception workshops, this is a traditional thing that you've probably done to start projects with these. So it almost feels like I don't need to say this, but what happens is platforms often emerge organically. It comes out of a DevOps team, and the DevOps team starts creating some assets, and those assets get reused, they're shared across, and at some point people realize they have this asset, but they've never taken the time to actually socialize the existence of that asset and the cost of that asset and the benefits of that asset with the senior stakeholders. And eventually somebody says, why are we spending money on this thing? It has no direct impact on our customers. So why should we be continuing it? And so it's really important to get those people on board from the start, if you have the opportunity to start out right. So business executives, technology executives, you need, and product managers, which I'll get to in a second, very important constituency. So this, again, like your interactions with the developers early on, it's a chance to get buy-in and commitment from them. It's a chance to understand what their needs are, but it's also a chance for you to share your vision and to get them to understand what the value of this thing is and why you're doing it and why it needs ongoing support. Now, the product managers are a very important constituency because they're the ones that are going to pay a certain price every time a new team onboards to the platform. So the best designed platforms, when you move from a team doing everything themselves to using a shared reusable asset, doing things in a consistent way, and it benefits the organization in the long run, but that means giving up a certain amount of feature work for a time. And this is the ongoing battle, is getting those product owners to say, yeah, okay, for this iteration, it's okay. I understand we're going to get less, we're going to be delivering less features because the team's going to be onboarding to the platform. So it's really important to get these folks on board. And one way to do that is to have an explicit contract with them. So they need to understand the value of the platform, what it's going, you're going to, the benefits you're going to get. You're going to deliver faster. You're going to have fewer defects. You're going to know and have more visibility into what's going on with your teams. You're going to be compliant and secure. But in exchange for all those benefits that we promise, you need to give the team a little bit of time to get on board, and this is a battle that goes on continuously. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this at various organizations where the team wants to use the platform. There's a great platform there, and it's just they can't stop for 1 second in feature delivery to get on board. So now we're in the engage and enlist. So we've got it off on the right foot. We know what we're going to build. Everyone knows what we're going to do, and they know why we're doing it, and they've funded it, and we're going to start building stuff. So we need to engage and enlist our early adopters. They're very, very important. So this is something that I've heard, time and time again as well. That you need to find a team that you can work with. You want to build a thin slice that's delivering real business value. So you don't want to just build something abstract or a proof of concept. You certainly don't want to build a platform without having a business user, a product for it to actually drive. And so you need to find a team that you can work with through the early stages. It should be a team that isn't under tremendous delivery pressure, and they need to be people that are open-minded and willing to experiment and want to help and contribute back to the platform. If you do this well, you're going to build up this all-important trust with the developers. If you do this, if you work with these folks, and it's important to keep them up to date all the time, keep them informed. Even when you have nothing for them to use, keep them informed about the delivery, and you will find that those people become your greatest supporters later on. Once you build up that trust, you'll have a little bit of leeway to experiment with those folks, and they can become your guinea pigs and help you contribute back to the platform as well. But it's important to remember a couple of things. First of all, this diagram's a little confusing, sorry. But this is the iconography from team topologies. And there are two different interaction styles that a platform team might adopt at any one time. X as a service, where you're building stuff, and you're building pipelines or documentation or something like that you're going to offer to them on a self-service basis. And self-service also really builds trust, by the way. And sometimes you're collaborating. Sometimes you're being a consultant and you're talking to them, you're helping them use the platform, and you're helping them deliver. And you need to constantly pivot back and forth. In the early stages, you're probably going to do a lot of this consulting with your early adopters. And the consulting will come in episodes. You'll have spikes of work where you want to spend time. And what we found is that if you can get the thin slice, if you can get the first iteration of the team on the platform to be successful, and if you can get them to follow the right patterns, and for them to build a successful thin slice that uses the platform according to the guidelines and principles and policy that you've set forward, it's going to go much smoother later on. There's never going to be, like I said, we need to negotiate time for the team to do this. There's never going to be a time later on when they can go back. If they get started off on the wrong foot, there's never going to be a time when they can go back and fix their architecture. So it's really important for the platform team to spend time early on with those teams and help them get it right and get that and build that thin slice. I think Pete Hodgson has a blog post where he calls this white glove onboarding. So you want to give them this excellent service at the beginning, and then that should be less time-consuming and less frequent as time goes on. So that time thing goes with the graph, where it's of effort swinging back and forth between consulting and coding. Success factor 5 is about measuring and sharing your progress. So I talked about value. The problem is with value and expressing the value is that it's a lagging indicator. So those business objectives and the positive economic benefits don't come till quite a ways down the road. What we want is some leading indicators that tell us exactly how the platform is progressing at any given time. And we're fortunate that there's been a lot of progress made in measuring engineering effectiveness and measuring developer flow, developer perceived productivity. You know, things from Microsoft, the Developer Velocity Lab, and Google, a lot of the large internet companies have established engineering effectiveness groups that have given us metrics that we can use. So this is just some examples of metrics. I see the accelerate metrics are on here. Those are also lagging indicators. Everybody loves the DORA metrics. It's great. I'm glad everyone's measuring DORA metrics and displaying them, but they were never meant as a team, as an indicator of team or especially individual productivity or success. They're indicators of organizational success and predictors of organizational, of business success. But there are other things like onboarding rates, number of workloads deployed, number of support tickets, how much time people spend on tools. There's a whole list of these, and I think Heiko showed some in the previous talk. And you know, there are a lot of these metrics that you can use, and you need to then display them and radiate them to the rest of the organization. So this is an example of a dashboard that we use internally. We have a platform at Thoughtworks, Neo, that anybody can get on, and if somebody wants to build an application that shows our, you know, what thing people are staffed on, or what our revenue, a different way to show that, they can build an application, get access to APIs and developer tools through this Neo thing. So this is just an example. You can build it yourself like these folks did on React. You could use Backstage. We do a lot of Backstage work in other parts. Say in North America, we work closely with Spotify. This is a portal for John Lewis, is a company in the UK who built this portal to display how their digital platform is behaving and what value it's delivering, and the impact that it's making on the engineers' day-to-day lives. This Backstage, but it's really important to remember that the portal is not the platform. This is just getting Backstage and implementing a portal doesn't really get you that far if you don't have the underlying platform and you don't have the platform team to. And then there's commercial tools as well. DX is a company that was founded to help companies measure and display those DevX metrics that we talked about that came out of the Microsoft Developer Velocity Lab. Agility Health is another one that will help you in real time, give you a nice, easy to use, colorful display of how well your platform is being taken up and what impact it's having on developers' lives. It's really important to make this as transparent and widely and easily available as possible. So finally, let's talk about ongoing, how do you operate the platform over the long term? And this is true perhaps at all stages. Let me just back up a little, one sec. This is a really complicated topic, funding models, right? But it's something that people constantly ask for. Every time I give a talk about platforms to a customer, they ask, how do people fund these things? Because this is a real problem. And getting centralized, it's a centralized shared thing, and if the money is all going to business to support business features, then where is the funding for the platform going to come from? It's a question on everybody's mind. And I wouldn't say I have an absolute answer for that, but these are two funding models that we've seen work, or we've seen in practice, and there are lots of others, but the first one where the platform team is part of the engineering group, and you have a lot of product engineering teams, and then you have the platform team, and the funding comes from the engineering group, comes as part of the engineering group's funding. This we found less successful because the platform team is always in competition with there's never a time when the platform team is going to take precedence over feature delivery. And so it's really, this is really much harder to justify. It sets up competition, there's a lot of friction there. A more successful mode that we've seen is where the funding and the sponsorship for the platform team come from the highest level. So from the CTO or from the CIO, from the more senior tech execs, where there is if there's an organization where you have engineering and you may have product and you might have operations, and making a platform one of those first-class parts of the organization with their own funding means that the engineering group doesn't see, ultimately it does come as a tax on their funding, but they don't see it, and there's less friction, and it's more successful. And the other thing is you have very senior sponsorship so funding models and sponsorship executive sponsorship kind of go together. So when people can see that it's sponsored from the top down, you're going to get a lot more support. And finally, success factor 7 is about that you need a process to have intake for feature requests and have those be prioritized and go into a backlog. So you may get input from a variety of sources. From the engineering group, obviously from the users of the platform, they're going to have feature requests. You probably will also get feature requests from architects. Security most certainly is going to have feature requests. Your SREs are going to want different kinds of observability, and they're going to want different kinds of resilience built into the platform and things like that. So all of this comes into a funnel and should go through a process that needs to be very transparent. As much as you can engage the rest of the organization through this process, so reviewing the ideas, assessing them, going through a little mini inception for each one of these features, and then delivering them, the better off you will be. And so this needs to be transparent and allow everyone to participate. One of the ways that we found useful to prioritize is this value-based prioritization. One of my colleagues has used this more than once. And that's where we try and rank things. I know it's sometimes hard to put an absolute number on these things, but these two dimensions are value. How much value does it deliver to the teams? How much value does it deliver to the business? And then it gives you a clear understanding of, obviously, if it's valuable to both, then that's the stuff you want to prioritize, the things you want to do first. If it's successful, if it's valuable to the team, but it's not immediately obvious why the business is going to get value from it, then you have to ask if it is actually moving those success metrics. So you've done some measurements, you've done some value stream analysis, you've got some dashboards that tell people how successful the platform is in terms of onboarding rates or whatever. Is it actually going to change those success metrics? That's the thing you want to ask there. If it's valuable to the business but not to the delivery teams, then you're going to have to do a little sales work, and you're going to have to make sure that the delivery teams understand why maybe their requested feature is going to have to be deprioritized for the time being, so that you can deliver something of value to the business, to the greater business. And obviously in the lower left-hand corner there, we just defer those things. You probably never get to them anyway. Okay, that's all I had to say. I want to thank these folks. These are some of the people that contributed the most they're people from all over the world, and you might know some of them, but they've been enormously helpful, and I stand on the shoulders of giants when I talk about this stuff. So thank you very much. So that kind of concludes this segment, and I'd like to introduce the speakers that are. Oh, we're doing questions. Are we doing questions now on this? We can do questions now. I guess we are. Okay. So questions for me, Scott. Do you want to facilitate?
Yeah.
I think it'd be.
I can read them up. The first one is, feels a bit awkward because you can read them as well, but I'll frame them in a useful way. The first one is about considerations when building a platform team. Like, what is the structure? What is the size? How should they be organized? Is there anything to think about there?
There's a lot of different ones. So it depends on the organization. I can tell you there are some structures that are more common than others. So it starts out small. I think that's one thing to say, is that you start out with one platform team, small team, two-pizza team, cross-functional. And if you're going to grow, as the platform grows, you're probably going to have to grow the people that are working on the platform. And in that case, you probably follow a seed and split model where you might want to take that team and bring new people on board, but get some of the previous contributors go into the new teams. And that's kind of the general advice for scaling up a team like that. One thing that I can say Spotify does, so Spotify's been doing this platform stuff for a long time, and they have a lot of wisdom. And they have sort of a layered approach to so they have a base platform that the whole organization uses, and there's a platform team or teams responsible for that. But then each one of their business areas, which they call missions, has their own platform. So there is a business-specific platform that sits on top of that. So you have one platform team or teams that maintains a base platform, and then you have a platform team dedicated to each one of the the applications. It might be consumer, or it might be artists, or whatever. So that's another way that people do it.
Yeah. The second question is, I think I'm going to rephrase that a little bit, because you did speak about leading and lagging indicators of what makes a platform successful. But what do you say you need to measure or improve to have a platform remain effective over time as it goes into maintenance mode? What would you say?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to fix. It depends on it depends on what you find in the value stream. I think throughput is really important, right? That's how fast are you able to go to? Somebody said "hello world" when they thought about platforms, and I take that to mean, how long does it take you to build a hello world application? How long does it take you to build a team to build their first application using the platform, to go from 0 to hello world? And that's a really good indicator of how effective the platform is being for any kind of platform. It might be, how long does it take you to get into test? It might be how many defects are being returned to the teams, huge source of waste often. So it depends on the organization, probably.
Then there's, have you seen platforms used to measure individual productivity, and is that a useful thing to try and do using a developer platform?
Is that a setup? No, it's not. None of these metrics were intended, and this is often, I know that people are going to go away and do that, and people are going to probably try and, what are your personal Dora metrics? Are you meeting your KPIs and with your mean time to recovery for your code? But no, it's not meant to ever look at individual performance. We know that 10x teams are much more powerful and productive, I use that word again, than 10x developers. We're not going for individual success.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, the next one is about over-engineering. So I've seen some organizations where people went out and created a big business case. They need to build this cloud platform. It's going to take them 12 months, and they just go away and build everything. How do you avoid that? The bloat and the potential over-engineering.
Yeah, I didn't touch on that, and perhaps I should have, because so in team topologies, they talk about the thinnest viable platform. So I think we've mentioned this on the radar many times as well, and that is, it's really important. Pick a few features. When you start out, you do all those inceptions, you do your value stream mapping, and you probably get a few capabilities that you want the platform, and it's really important to have a handful, maybe you have 10 altogether that you want to build, and of those, you need to pick 1 or 2 for your first iteration. And the big big infrastructure projects almost never work, in my experience, and they're very expensive as well. And it's much better to just deciding if I want to tell. There's a big analogy to building canals that I read recently. But you know, vision is great. It's great to have a big vision. And it's inspiring, and you need to stay consistent and persistent with the vision during the building of the platform. But you also need to observe and sense and respond. So if it's great to have a good vision, but if you run into problems that require you to pivot and you can persist with the vision, that is a recipe for disaster. So it's important to balance those two things.
All right, I think that's us at time. Thank you so much, Scott.